What's up, my friends? It is Danny Gallows, of course, and welcome back to part number 4 of my Navy experience, where, of course, I'm sharing with all of you my experience in the military and in the Navy specifically. Before I get started today, I should mention, a couple of you guys probably saw my vlog that I put out this morning about waiting for the inspectors. I'm just finally getting back into my office right now, and I was hoping to get back in here a little bit earlier because, as some of you guys know already from my previous vlog video this morning, it's about 90 degrees outside today. This is like the first hot summer day. I hate the heat. I don't have AC in here, and it's kind of like, I can already feel the sweat beating on my head. So to be honest with you guys, it's probably going to be a short video today. But what I'm going to be discussing with you guys today is, of course, where I left off, exiting A school and actually going into the fleet. The first time ever at a actual Navy station where there was aircraft carriers and ships and aircraft and everything, and what my experience was like being there for the first time. So of course you guys know that I went to A school in Pensacola, Florida. Then I went back home to Maine to visit, my mom and my friends for a good couple of weeks out there. And then finally it was time to go out to the fleet. Now this was my first time ever out to the West Coast. I mean, you're talking about Washington, Portland, Washington, Oregon, California. I've never been out to the West Coast before. It was my first time. And this is a small town Maine boy growing up near, craggy coastlines and pine trees and, lush forests, and, Maine's a really beautiful state. And then being dropped basically in the middle of the desert, because that's what, even San Diego, as nice as it is, California is a desert with highways. That's basically what it is. And it was such a shock to me because the sun, and my blood was thick from living in Maine, so I was sweating all the time, and just being out in that environment for the first time was really, really harsh. But it was also really exciting because I had never been out there before. I mean, like you look around, like the palm trees in San Diego, like even the palm trees were brought to San Diego from somewhere else. Like all the natural foliage was so different, all the fauna and stuff was so different from Maine. And I remember that was later on in my experience though, because when I arrived in San Diego, to begin with, it was nighttime. Strange, because sometimes I arrive to everything at nighttime, but it was nighttime once again. I remember being at the airport, and there was someone at the airport. Again, my memory is kind of like a little bit fuzzy, but like there was someone at the airport who was offering rides home to new recruits that had just gotten off the plane. So of course, I got a ride. It was me and like a couple other guys that I had no idea who it was. And I remember the guy brought cookies with him. He had brought this big plastic bag filled with cookies that he brought from home because he was just coming off of leave too. Of course, he was returning to the ship though, instead of being there for the first time. So he's passing around these cookies, and we're eating these cookies and having a good time. And I remember crossing over the Coronado Bridge for the first time at night, which was really, if you guys don't know, you can look up the Coronado Bridge online. It's just this long steel bridge that runs across the entire length, basically, of San Diego Bay over onto Coronado, North Island, which I was stationed. Really surreal going across the bridge at night. It was one of those big highway bridges, really long bridges with a lot of lights and everything. And then we got into Coronado, which was kind of like a nice town, really, really nice San Diego high-class town. And then we made that turn onto the military base. And let me tell you guys, if you've never been onto a Navy base before where there are aircraft carriers, it's quite an experience, especially at nighttime. Because at North Island, there's enough berthing area for 3 aircraft carriers. They stand kind of like in a they're docked in like almost like a Z formation. Like there's one this way, there's one this way, and then there's one the other way, like that. Like in a Z formation like that. 3 aircraft carriers. And when I got there, there just happened to be 3 there at once. I believe it was the Nimitz, and then my aircraft carrier, the Ronald Reagan, and then the Truman or the Eisenhower or something. I can't remember, one of the others, but my ship was the newest ship at the time, which was CVN 76 the USS Ronald Reagan. It was a brand new aircraft carrier. It had just been built. It had just gone on its maiden voyage, basically, around the Horn, around Brazil, and they traveled from Norfolk, Virginia, around the Horn, that they call it, around through the Straits of Magellan, I believe it is, through Panama and everything, and then up onto the West Coast. They had just got done making that voyage and everything. So when I got to the military base, of course, seeing these 3 aircraft carriers was a sight. I mean, it was like, you guys know I'm a Star Wars fan. It was like seeing like seeing a Star Destroyer or something, like in real life, like actually being there next to this massive vessel, because aircraft carriers aren't aerodynamic or sleek or anything like that. They're just big craggy pieces of gray steel just sticking up out of the ocean. And I got there at night, so all the aircraft carriers were lit up, and their lights, all of their lights all over the deck and all over the flight deck control and the bottom, and everything was lit up. And I remember it was like stepping onto the set of like an action movie or something. Like there was this huge event going on, and everybody was there getting ready to film a movie. Like that's what it felt like, because it felt like a giant set piece, like almost like everything was like a giant set piece, like a blue screen set piece or something. So it was very surreal coming onto this military base. Again, small town kid, coming onto this huge environment with these big craggy steel ships all over the place, and I'm expected to go through security, go through the line, get up to the ship and everything. And so that process then started. They had 2 plankways. They had the main plankway, which was the big plankway going up into the ship inside an aircraft carrier, inside an aircraft door. And then they had a smaller plank, which was for like the officers. And I remember that night specifically, I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. For some reason, we went up the officers' plankway, which normally you wouldn't be able to do, because obviously, we were recruits, we were seamen, it was for officers. But I think it was because we were just there, we were brand new. So they brought us up the officers' stairway. And I remember, it just so happened by chance that I had this like notion before going into the Navy that I wanted to be a yellow shirt or a white shirt or something like that. And if you guys don't know what those are, the blue shirts on the flight deck, they're responsible for like chalking and chaining and stuff like that. And the yellow shirts, they're the ones directing the aircraft. They stand there on the flight deck, and they actually do the air traffic control by hand signals on the ground. And for some reason, I had this like bizarre notion even before going into the Navy that that's what I wanted to do. And it was just like, nobody does that. Nobody comes onto an aircraft carrier saying, I want to be a yellow shirt. You just wind up in that division, and that's what you do. You'll go to work on the flight deck, or you'll go to work in flight ops or something, but you're always sectioned off into a division. And at that time, I didn't have a division. All I thought in my head was, I just want to be a yellow shirt. So just by chance, but by absolute, I mean, it might have been by chance, it might have been well, I guess it was by chance, because he was down there standing some kind of a watch. Just so happened to be ABH-1 Gonzalez, who happened to be one of my head petty officers in V1, which ended up being my division. But it was really strange, because I went up to him not knowing who he was. And I specifically told him, like, this is the division that I'm interested in going in. I want to be a yellow shirt on the aircraft. And it was strange because he looked at me for a minute, obviously because this is an odd request. And he looks at me for a second, and he picks up his radio, and he kind of radios upstairs. He's like, hey, Chief, check this out. He's like, I got this guy down here that says he wants to be a yellow shirt up on the flight deck. And the Chief's like, oh yeah? And I'm standing there like, what's going on? Does this normally not happen? Does nobody does this when they get on board? And it just so happens that because I said that, I wound up in V1 division, and that was my division for the rest of the cruise. It was just like this kind of like chance thing that I had this notion in my head, and it just so happened that a yellow shirt, one of the head yellow shirts, was on watch that night. And he's like, hey Chief, check this out. Like this guy wants to, okay, come on up to our division. And that's how my tale began in the division. I could have gone anywhere. I could have been a green shirt and worked on the catapults and the resting gear. I could have been a purple shirt and went to go work in fuels. I could have been a white shirt and went to go work up in V5 in flight deck control. Anything. But just because I had that bizarre random notion in my head, there I was in V1. And now, the first thing they do is, they'll take you to the office, sign your final paperwork and stuff like that. But since it was nighttime, the only thing for me to do at that point was just to go back to the berthing and go to sleep. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Navy berthings and all, Navy berthings are a sight to see. You thought boot camp was bad, the berthings are especially bad, because this is just lines and lines of racks as far as you can see, but they're in like this contained area. So it's like having hundreds of racks, and they're like, you walk in, you turn to the left, and you turn to the right. You turn to the left, you see racks on the right side, you see racks on the left side, and then an area in the middle with lockers. And that's exactly the same as you turn to the other side. And then you walk through, and it's just it's just line after line after line after line of racks. Look to the left, bunks, bunks, locker. Look to the right, bunks, bunks, locker. As far as you can see all the way down, and it's in like this contained area. And the problem with that is that, it's almost like being in prison. Because, you don't choose who you live with. You might not like these people, you might not get along with these people, but all of a sudden you're thrown in this environment, and like, that's your rack over there, and like, you just go. And like, that's your space. And you're meeting people along the way and making temporary friends, like as it is and stuff, but it's a very strange experience. Especially because I remember the first night we were there, actually the first couple of days we were there, they didn't have enough room left in the V1 berthing, and they had to move me and another guy over to the V5 berthing. And it was strange because it was almost like a double impact. Like, I felt strange being there, but now I was in a berthing that I wasn't supposed to be in. So it was like this really, really strange situation. So I remember I did weird stuff, like, I felt very out of my environment, and I didn't want to get in anybody's way, so I had this big suitcase with me. That actually one of the guys commented on. He looks at me, as soon as I walk in the berthing, he's like, "Why you got that big suitcase with you?" And I said, "Well, because like we're going on cruise, like we're going on a 6-month cruise." And the guy's like, "Yeah, eventually we're going on a cruise. Like, we're not going on a cruise right now. Like, you got plenty of time to get your bags. We're not going on a cruise for like another 5 or 6 months or so. Like, you got plenty of time to get your stuff together." And I didn't know that, so I had this gigantic suit, like one of those huge suitcases with me, just filled with stuff, because I didn't know what to bring. I didn't know what to do, and so I didn't have any room for it. It wouldn't fit in a locker. You can't leave your stuff out. So I remember like the first couple of nights I was there, I actually was laying down in my rack with my suitcase at my feet, and I had my suitcase up on my feet. And it just, looking back on it now, it was just ridiculous. It's like, obviously, take the suitcase out and just, while you're sleeping, just take it out and put it by the locker. I know nobody's going to care while you're sleeping, but it was because I was in such a strange environment, and I didn't want to step out of place. I didn't want to become a problem. I didn't want to become noticed by anyone, so I just kind of did weird stuff like that. But then what you'll come to find, though, is that those kind of things only last for a little while, because after that you start getting out on your own. I remember, asking somebody, so do we need someone to go out into town with? And he said, no, this was the first time we could go out by ourselves. We could go out, and there was a van that met us right outside the ship, and it would take us downtown. It would take us to the mall and stuff like that. So we had a free ride downtown, and I started going out. I started going out more by myself, experiencing San Diego. I went to the mall. I went to the seaside. I went to some restaurants. And I was doing a lot of things by myself for a while, until I really started to get into the groove of things and become comfortable with making friends, because, the Navy is one place, the military especially is one place that you can't stay in and then just not make friends. Like, you're always guaranteed to make friends in the military, and it'll happen by chance. It'll just be like, the new guy needs a job to do, so you take him up onto the flight deck. And that's what happened to me. One of my first friend ever in the Navy, his name was Hutch. He was a really cool, down-to-earth dude, and he took me up onto the flight deck for the first time to suck out pad eyes. Sucking out pad eyes and blowing out pad eyes is a job that you will come to learn to hate as a flight deck crew member, because what it is you think that like the Navy's got all this like brand new fancy technology for dealing with situations like blowing out, and I should mention that pad eyes are tie downs. They're little divots. They're basically little divots in the flight deck where you can hook chains into. They have bars going across. And they're like that big around, like that. And you can hook chains into them for tying down aircraft. The problem is though that when it rains, you have to blow these pad eyes out and you have to suck the water out of the pad eyes because they will they'll fill with water and they'll rust. And then you'll have to repaint them because the paint will chip and all that stuff. So you have to blow them out. And you think that like the Navy would have some like high tech, like wireless vacuum, reverse vacuum kind of technology. It's a shop vac, an old crappy metal shop vac with a crappy vacuum hose duct taped to a stick. No joke. Like that's what it is. And it's like, and you sit there and you go down. I mean, there's hundreds. You got to remember, the flight deck is covered with pad eyes. It's covered with tie downs because you got to be able to tie down an aircraft anywhere. So they're covered in the flight deck. Now you want to all day evolution. This was all day out there in the heat, in the sun, just blowing out pad eyes. That's what you do when the ship is in port and you have nothing to do. It's very strenuous. You have these stressful jobs. We did stuff like needle gunning. Needle gunning, if you guys know what needle gunning is, it's basically just a bunch of small steel dowels, basically, tiny steel dowels, and you shove them into this gun, this steel gun, and it makes the steel dowels vibrate like this, and then you gun the deck, and you got to break up all of the stuff on the deck, all the rust and all the old paint. I mean, it's really strenuous jobs. And then aside from that, of course, we did stuff like sweeping and mopping. We were glorified janitors. And that's what a lot of people don't understand is that when you're in port, out to sea and in port are different situations. When you're out to sea, you are in your flight uniform, you are doing flight ops, you are doing your assigned job in the military, what you're supposed to do, right? But when you're in port, all you're doing is cleaning the ship. That's all you do, is you're maintaining the ship. And in a lot of ways, of course, logically that makes sense, because you have to have someone that, the officers aren't going to do it, the seamen, the flight crew, the regular people, the recruits, we're the ones who maintain the ship in port. And so, yeah, that's how I met one of my best friends. My first friend ever, Hutch, in the Navy, was blowing out pad eyes. And, it was funny, too, because I tried to put on this whole persona going into the Navy. A lesson that you guys should learn is that the Navy is a fresh start, but you should never really, fresh start yourself. And that's something that I tried to do, is that I tried to give myself a name, a new name. I was calling myself Sora because I was playing like Kingdom Hearts a lot of time, for a majority of the time I was there, and I was calling myself Sora, and it was just like, it just so happened that Hutch also played Kingdom Hearts and he immediately knew the name, and it was kind of embarrassing. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, don't do that to yourself. What you guys will come to find out is that if you're looking for a new life, if you're looking for a nickname, right? If you're looking to fit in with a new group of friends, the Navy will do that for you. They will supply you with these things. As you start to make friends and as you start to get into the swing of things, people will give you nicknames and people will ask you to hang out with them and people will warm up to you. You have to let those things happen naturally. And one of the lessons that I learned was not to force myself. Just, be natural. It's just, the Navy will give these things to you, and it was such a magical experience, and then I continued to meet friends. As I was in the division, I met my best friend ever in the Navy, Kyle Haas. He had one of the strangest spellings of Kyle. I think it might be a little bit more common nowadays, but it was Kiel. Kyle, and we thought his name was Keel for the longest time because we never heard him pronounce it. But Kyle was how should I? He was like he's like the Johnny Knoxville of San Diego. Like imagine Johnny Knoxville, but just in another body, and that was Kyle. Like he was just like this crazy guy. Again, you're like not sure how he really get into the Navy because he was just off. He was just loopy, and he was crazy. And I mean, I remember we did things like we dressed up in crazy outfits and we'd film these funny videos. And I remember one time we bought we bought these electric dirt bikes at Walmart for like $400 or something like that. And then we took them around our apartment complex and everything because Kyle was the one who gave me my first apartment. He was the one, after we started warming up to each other, we started to find things in common with each other, started really building a friendship. He actually offered to let me move in with his girlfriend into their apartment. And that was the first time, it was so great for me because that was the first time that I had had an apartment basically to myself. Of course, I was living with other people, but this was my first apartment with someone else. It was such an eye-opening experience. And thankfully, I was living in the living room on a futon, and I only had to pay $200 in rent, which was just, that was pennies to me at that time. I was making like $1,600 a month, $1,600 a month at that point, plus hazard pay when I was out to sea. So I was doing very well. And so, $200 a month, I was like, sure. I was like, now I can get a car, and now I can do this and do that, and I did. And it was fun because me and Kyle just had this crazy life. We would drink when we were off of work, and on the weekends we would invite people over to play like poker games sometimes. We would just have a blast, just drinking and being loud and making noise and then putting on dresses and taking pictures. I mean, we just had a crazy time together as friends. Of course, as you will in the military, because that's what comes with the military is you will, sometimes people develop things like drinking and smoking and stuff like that while they're in the military because that's just the environment. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I got caught up in the world of drinking, and alcohol and cigarettes and energy drinks and missing meals and just treating my body poorly because of the environment that you're in. When you're in the military, it's like, okay, I'm hardcore now. Okay, I can handle all this. So you just go out full bore, especially if you've never been in that kind of environment before, like I hadn't. So I just went out full force. And the lesson really to be learned from that situation is that there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine, that's okay, but just, everything in moderation, because I'm sure that I embarrassed myself quite a number of times while intoxicated, while out doing things, things that I still think about today that I'm like, oh man, I really treated that person bad, or I was really acting stupid, but again, it comes with the environment, so just be cautious going into that when you're introduced to that brand new world. Take things as they come. Don't try to go into it so headstrong. But yeah, that was our life out in California. It was a different environment. It was sun, it was blue skies, it was heat, which I'm experiencing a lot of today, as you guys can probably see. Whew. And it was just this brand new environment because San Diego was so different from Maine, and I just had a blast out there. San Diego is such a beautiful city, and there's so much to do. And just like I said, even just hanging out at home with Kyle, again watching anime. We watched Akira together. We picked that up at Walmart and came back and watched Akira together, and that was our life. Was just hanging out with friends and drinking and going to work in the Navy because a lot of people don't realize that when you're in the military, even when you're docked in port, people tend to believe that you have all of these rules and restrictions, you can't leave the boat, you're so under the watch. And while that's true to some extent, that's also not true. Working in the Navy is like a regular job in a lot of ways. You come to work in the morning, you get out of work in the afternoon, and then you don't work on weekends. That's literally how it is. And how they cover everything is that they have watches. I was in watch group number 3, and they would cycle through, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way through the week, so that there's always divisions, always certain people standing watch over the ship. And man, did duty days suck, because it's like, I can't tell you how many times my duty day was up, and it was like just the start of a weekend. Like I'd have a duty day on a Saturday, and we just got out of work on Friday, and the only thing I can do is go home for a couple of hours, have whatever fun I can, and then wake up immediately the next morning and go right back to work on a Saturday. And it was just, and having to stand watches too is very, very, very difficult. Having to stand, if you're standing watch in the front of the ship, like checking people's ID as they come in, that's a watch to stand. You'll have to stand there in your full-on Navy dress blues, standing in one spot, standing in one spot, in the same exact position for 4 hours. 4 hours. You can't move. You can barely talk to people. All you're doing is checking IDs. Checking IDs as people are coming in, giving them the salute and everything. 4 hours. That would be like me, right here as I am, standing right here, right now, recording the video, but except this video was 4 hours long. That's what a watch is like. I mean, some people can't handle it. You know, it's really, really difficult to do, but that is the Navy life. That's the Navy life, you know. And I guess that's pretty much going to do it for my initial first experience in the Navy. Like, that's basically like my first 6 months or so in the Navy. And then for the next video that I'm going to do for you guys is going to be talking about my very first trip out to sea, my very first trip to Hawaii, and then basically my life in the fleet after that and how things continue to evolve and continue to change for me. More life stories and more life lessons, of course, to come. And that will be in the next video. So thank you guys once again for joining me for this section of my Navy experience. You guys can look forward to my first out to sea trip for tomorrow's video and tomorrow's vlog as well. So I will see you guys next time. Later.